An absolute unnecessary counterintelligence risk, and one putting lives in danger. That is the warning today from one top Democrat as the concern is now growing over the national security risks just triggered by a new move from the White House, ordering the CIA to send an unclassified email. Inside that email, the first name, last initial of every CIA staffer hired in the last 2 years. The CIA complied. The fear now, foreign hackers and the new safety threat for Americans in the U.S. and abroad. CNN's Zach Cohen is with us. He's got much more reporting on this. Good morning, Zach. What are you learning?
Yeah, Kate, this is part of the CIA's broader effort to comply with that executive order from President Donald Trump to downsize the federal workforce. But look, for an agency that prioritizes and places a premium on secrecy, this is really, frankly, a surprising move that the CIA sent this list of names to the White House in an unclassified email. And it's obviously raising concerns about national security risks, about counterintelligence threats that could come from exposing the identities of these individuals. Now, the people on this list include all new hires at the agency, people who have worked there for 2 years or less. It includes people from analysts to those that are in the training program to eventually go undercover and be deployed overseas to dangerous hotspots around the world, as the CIA does. But look, because of that, this is the exact kind of information the CIA has really worked hard to protect in the past. For their part, they're saying they're complying with Donald Trump's order, and they're doing what he directed in a statement. They said, quote, "We are complying with the executive orders and are providing requested information through the appropriate channels." Now, sources telling me and our colleague Katie Bo Lillis, though, that this option of sending the list of names with just the first name and the first letter of the last name was sort of a way to maybe try to obscure the identities of these individuals, but it doesn't take a genius to maybe piece some clues together and potentially identify who some of these people are. Some people sources warning us that could even end some of these officers' careers before they even get started. Folks who the CIA deems it's too dangerous to send them overseas into a dangerous situation, given their identities could be out there now. So Congressman Jim Himes, who's the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, raising some of these concerns yesterday after this news broke. Take a listen to what he said.
Certainly the ones that are operational, the case officers who are operating in very, very dangerous places around the world. They are living undercover. If they are discovered, and especially those that don't have diplomatic immunity, I mentioned them earlier, it can be curtains for them. It's just not that hard to convey classified information from one government department to the other. So we've put a lot of people needlessly at risk here.
So in addition to the national security concerns that Himes is raising there, he also raised concerns about sort of this happening against the backdrop of Donald Trump's sort of broader efforts to really downsize these agencies. This is something we were seeing at the CIA. They've been similarly offered by the so-called buyouts like we've seen at other agencies. So it remains to be seen, but obviously this move to send an unclassified email really raising some concerns this morning.
Let's see what happens in the next few hours and this morning. It's good to see you, Zach. Thank you for your reporting. John.
All right, with us now, CNN senior law enforcement analyst, former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Andy, nice to see you. How secure do you think this data transfer is?
It's not. That's why we call it unclassified, because it's not secure. And look, John, it's not hard to remember a time when we saw OPM, which is the agency the information was passed to before going on to the White House, was the victim of a devastating hack in 2015 by the Chinese government, hackers affiliated with the Chinese government, in which the personally identifying records of over 20 million Americans who are employees of the federal government were stolen and taken to China. So the idea that this could happen again is absolutely out there. There's no reason, I'm sure OPM has improved some things in the years that follow, but this is a very juicy target for any nation state to go after. So this is just an incredibly reckless way to transfer very important information.
What about the fact the names it's only the first name and the last initial of the last name. So you and I would be cleverly disguised as John B. and Andy M.
So while that might stop you and I, John, it will not stop a determined state-sponsored adversary, particularly one like, let's stay with the China example. China has stolen so much information, such a vast volume of information on Americans from places like healthcare records or DMV records and things of that nature. The reason they have that sort of massive data lake is because they can use those different data sets to cross-correlate them to pursue issues exactly like this. Once you've got enough data points, when you line them up correctly, you can pretty easily penetrate a first name and a last initial with address and everything else you can associate with that target to understand their exact identity.
So what impact do you think this will have, Andy, on intelligence work that is being done around the world right now?
Well, it clearly puts these individuals at risk, and any of them who were slated for undercover work or maybe are engaged in that work already are at risk. Not just themselves physically and legally, particularly in the far off overseas locations where they work, but the people they are working with. Let's remember that one of the core responsibilities of case officers is to recruit people from foreign countries, be they politicians, military leaders, political leaders, people in the private sector, to provide information to the United States government. Those people are at great risk if it becomes known that they are associating with someone who is connected to the CIA. So you have degrees of danger here, not just for the CIA people, but for the people they're trying to recruit. And I should say that communicating in the way that we are right now, the fact that the CIA is not even going very far to protect the names of their own people sends a very chilling message to those recruitment targets who might be thinking, hey, I shouldn't work with these people because they certainly won't protect me.
One former agency officer told my next guest, David Sanger of the New York Times, that the unclassified reporting of the names was a, quote, counterintelligence disaster. Democrats criticizing the move.
Apparently, some list, according to public reports, of officers at the CIA was sent to the White House in an unclassified email. Now, I remember a time, it seems very quaint, when Donald Trump was always talking about Hillary's emails. What about this email?
Joining us now, New York Times White House national security correspondent David Sanger, who's, of course, also a CNN political national security analyst. David, good morning. How big of a screw-up is this?
Good morning, Casey. Well, Casey, when we wrote about this yesterday, my colleague Julian Barnes and I were quite surprised to have heard about what had transpired. To their defense, and it's a pretty thin one, the unclassified email had the first names and the first initial of the last name of the agents and operatives and analysts involved. So the White House made the case, and others, that this did not actually, reveal their full identities. It sure gave some clues that would be pretty useful combined with other information from social media and et cetera. And we know that the Chinese and the Russians are particularly adept at combining all source intelligence to put these together. I guess the question that I would ask, Casey, would be, supposing we had published in the New York Times or you had published on CNN.com a list of names and first initials of the last name of people hired by intelligence agencies in the past 2 years, what do we think the White House would have been saying?
David,
and of course, we wouldn't have done that, right?
Right, we would never have done that. But can I just ask, sort of on a basic level, can we assume that this is being read by foreign adversaries, that this has been hacked?
I don't know for sure, but we do know in this particular case. But what do we know? We know that during the Obama administration, that the Russians were in the unclassified White House, State Department, and Pentagon systems. We know that the Chinese, through a group called Salt Typhoon that you and I have talked about before, got deeply into the telephone networks of 9 major telecom providers and got at the information about how the Justice Department basically taps into the phones of suspected spies, drug dealers, so forth, when they have warrants. So their skills here are pretty good, and particularly for getting into unclassified systems.
And very briefly, David, the lengths to which the CIA would normally go not to reveal the actual first name and last initial of, let's stick with the Directorate of Operations, the more kind of sensitive players here. Normally, how far would they go to make sure? I mean, normally these people operate in the world often under names that are not their actual first names, right?
That's right. And frequently they operate as well under a sort of official cover that, they've got a job and a title at the State Department, at the Agency for International Development, perhaps, at the Agriculture Department. They could be placed in other roles. So it's very possible that the data could be, cross-registered here. And remember, what did the Chinese steal back during the Obama years? They went into the Office of Personnel Management's database and got all kinds of data about U.S. Officials who had security clearances. They did not at that time get into the intelligence agency list because the intelligence agencies kept them separate from what's in the Office of Personnel Management. But this is obviously the kind of information foreign groups all look for.